Hi guys, UK Guns here. So in this video I'm going to be going over something slightly different to usual. It's going to be about range safety, in particular the 4 firearms safety rules, which are kind of universal rules that you've probably heard before. They're quite well known, kind of even internationally, kind of people understand these rules or some variation of them. The reason why I'm making this video is because I've had lots of comments from people on my previous videos around things like, what sort of experience do I need to get into shooting? Do I need training? Or can I get into shooting if I've had no experience or training? And the short answer is yes. The longer answer is, your club, if you join a club, will probably provide you with some training and those kinds of things. And there's more to it. But I thought I could just make a fairly short, try to make it as short as possible, short, succinct video just on kind of some basic safety elements. So this is aimed at the new shooter or someone who's looking at getting into shooting. Just really basic safety stuff. I'm going to try and keep this as short as possible and not go off too many tangents because there's loads more I could show you. And if you're interested in seeing that, so things like how to check how a rifle or a firearm is clear, how to clear it, make sure it's empty, how to sort of unload a firearm safely, all those kinds of things. If you want some sort of handling drills type thing, then leave a comment below. If enough people comment, or I see a few comments like that, I'll make a video on it because it's something I can do if you're interested in seeing it. But I don't want to go down that route too much on this video. I just want to keep it nice and succinct, just around the 4 firearms rules of safety, basically. Just so for new people looking to get into the sport, just as a really kind of foundation level for those, really, is what this is intended for. So people who haven't got a wealth of experience, essentially. So the 4 rules then are literally treat every firearm as if it was loaded, keep the firearm pointed in a safe direction at all times, never point it at anyone or indeed yourself, keep your finger off the trigger until you make the conscious decision to fire, and know your target and what is beyond it. And I'm going to break each one of those down and I'll sort of show you a little bit. I'll give some examples with my firearm that I have here with me. But bear in mind, every firearm is different, every range is different, etc, etc. One thing I will say before I go any further is every range, and even land and stuff you shoot on, will have their own rules. Make sure you familiarise yourself with the rules of the range you're on. They will have essentially these rules that we're going to go through, that's kind of universal. But they will also have additional rules around certain things, like if you have to have a breech flag, or how your rifle should be carried, or what it should be stored in when you're moving around, those kinds of things. They will have various different rules about when you can shoot, what calibers you can shoot, etc, etc. You must familiarise yourself with the rules of the range you are firing on. Or if you're shooting on land, just be familiar with the requirements of that land, what you're allowed to shoot there, etc, etc. But I'm not going to get too much into all that because, like I say, there's a whole sort of, roads I can go down which would really just elongate this video, and I want to keep it as short and succinct as possible for the newcomer. So first one then, treat every firearm as if it were loaded. Even if that firearm has just come out of a safe, it's just been handed to you by your buddy who's told you it's empty, whatever, treat it as if it's loaded. Because if we do that, if someone has made a mistake, and people are only human, people do miss things, if someone has made a mistake, it immediately lowers the risk of harm from that mistake, because we're treating it as if it was loaded. So if by the fluke 1 in a million chance it is actually loaded when it shouldn't be, if you treat it as such, i.e. we're not going to be pointing it at people, we're not going to be doing silly things with it, then we should minimise the risk of something catastrophic happening. Okay, shooting in the UK is a very, very safe sport, so I don't want to put people off. It's a very safe sport, accidents are rare, but that's because the vast majority of shooters follow these rules. And some people, without even knowing about it, people may not know these rules and be able to reel them off like I am in this video, but they're following these rules all the time. They're treating firearms as if they're loaded, they're keeping them pointed in a safe direction, they keep the trigger off the finger off the trigger until they're ready to fire, and they know their target and what's beyond it. They kind of do that, especially experienced shooters, without even thinking about it. But for newcomers, it is something you're going to have to think about. You need to sort of ingrain that into your subconscious. So that's the first one, treat every firearm as if it's loaded. When you pick that firearm up, first thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure it is unloaded by checking, and like I say, I could do that in a separate video and show you how you do that if you're interested. So it varies from firearm to firearm, but I can give you the basics of that. If you're interested in that, leave me a comment and I will definitely make a video on that. So then we're going to make sure that we're pointing that firearm in a safe direction at all times. So that takes us on nicely to the second rule, keeping a firearm pointed in a safe direction and also making sure we're not pointing the muzzle at anything that we're not going to shoot. So for instance, if we're hunting, obviously whatever it is we're hunting, or if we're on a range, our target, that's what we're pointing our rifle at, is our target. We're not pointing it at anything else, or certainly not anyone else, because obviously that leads to significant risk. So always keeping that rifle pointed at what we intend to shoot and nothing else. Really, really important. And this comes into quite importance when you're looking at some of the different disciplines you can do in the UK that might involve moving between firing points, and might involve you firing a few rounds and then moving to a different location or whatever. It becomes really, really important, because think about muzzle awareness. Where is your muzzle pointing at all times? It should be pointing roughly at the target, and certainly downrange at all times. So bearing in mind, while I'm changing my magazine, is my muzzle suddenly coming up towards the sky or ceiling, wherever I'm shooting? Is it coming around to the 180 degrees where it shouldn't be? Or, hopefully it shouldn't be pointing all the way backwards, but where is my muzzle? Where is it pointing? Very, very important to have that muzzle awareness, thinking about where is my muzzle at all times, keeping my rifle as flat as possible and keeping it pointing downrange. Very important. So that's number 2, keeping the muzzle pointed at the target that we're going to shoot. Number 3, keeping our finger off the trigger until we make a conscious decision to fire. What that means is exactly as it sounds. We're only going to place our finger on the trigger when we actually come to fire the rifle or shotgun, firearm, whatever. A common thing I see with new shooters a lot is they pick up a rifle. Obviously, I've checked this one is clear, it's pointing in the safe direction, but they pick up a rifle and they've got their finger on the trigger, and this is how they pick it up, and they'll shoulder it and they'll be like this. Now, obviously, that just adds an extra level of risk, because especially if you're not familiar with a rifle, you don't know how much pressure, or some triggers are very, very light. Some rifles, this has got a fairly standard trigger, so you have to give it a bit of a squeeze to get it to fire. But some have got hair triggers and really, really light. Just placing your finger on it could be enough. So you've got to be really, really careful. So just getting into the habit of keeping that finger like this, for instance, straight along above the trigger guard, or if that's not comfortable or difficult for you, just wrap it around the pistol grip. Keep it out of the way. Don't put it anywhere inside the trigger guard, either above the trigger guard or underneath, wrapped around the pistol grip. At least that way, you're keeping your finger well away from the trigger. And then when you come to fire, once you make that deliberate decision, I can see my sights, I can see my target. Now I'm going to transition my finger down to the trigger and squeeze the trigger. Simple as that. And the more you do that, it will just become natural and like muscle memory, essentially. So that's the 3rd rule. Keep an finger off the trigger until we make the conscious decision to fire. Rule number 4. Know our target and what's beyond it. That's important, what's beyond it. And this counts not just when we're rough shooting or hunting, but also on ranges. Even though we take it for granted, we're on a licensed range. They've got berms, they've got danger zones, all that stuff. Great. Doesn't absolve us of any kind of responsibility. We still need to be checking that it's safe to be shooting, that the target, the area we're shooting into is safe and free from people, that we're shooting at our target, we're not shooting over the berm or anything along those lines. We need to know our target and what's beyond it. And this is especially true if you're shooting on, say, land, you own some land, or you have permission to shoot on land. Think about, what am I shooting? What am I shooting at? If it's a fence, well, is that going to stop? Even a 2-2 is probably going to go through a wooden fence. So what's behind that wooden fence? If it's an 8-foot berm, then okay, you're going to ruin your fence, but fine. If it's a highway, a road behind that, well then probably not a good idea. So you need to think about how you're going to manage that, what you're going to do instead. So obviously that will come down to your specific situation, but it's important that you understand. You need to know your target. What am I shooting at? And what's beyond that. If I miss the target, because it's not just about whether I hit it and it goes through or whatever, if I miss the target, what could happen? Where could this round go? Really, really important. Like I say, shooting in the UK is a very safe sport, and one of that reasons is because people are very, very cautious. We have to be very, very safe, because ultimately, not only could you get in legal trouble, but you could lose your license, you could, be kicked out of the club, or any number of things that could happen if something were to go wrong. So the consequences range from minor of losing your hobby, which isn't maybe minor to everyone, but it's minor in the scale of the worst case is somebody could lose their life, which obviously is far, far worse. So, you know, we have a duty to be safe, sensible, and responsible at all times for the whole shooting community. And if anyone, because I've seen comments and stuff before where people like to make out that, you know, they don't need to follow these safety, or, you know, you're a chicken if you have to do this stuff. Nonsense. That kind of arrogance is what leads to accidents. If you're too arrogant that you think you don't need to follow the firearm safety rules, or you don't need to keep your finger off the trigger, or whatever the case may be, then you are an accident waiting to happen, without a doubt. And I certainly wouldn't want to be surrounded by those kinds of people. So don't let anybody put you down or make you feel inadequate or like you're being silly because you're being safe. There is no harm in being cautious. There's no shame in being cautious. Being cautious means you're going to be a good, safe shooter who can enjoy the sport for many years to come. The cowboys that want to be cowboys will either end up in legal trouble or will lose their license or something along those lines. So, you know, they're trouble. You want to stay away from those kinds of people and don't listen to them. Safety, 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 always important. I'm going to leave it there because, like I say, I don't want this video to be too long. I know it's a whistle-stop tour. There are other things I could go down, and if you're interested and you want to know, leave me a comment. I'll happily do some other videos on this subject. I plan to do some range safety stuff because I think it's relevant for, especially for new shooters. And we've recently had a lot of new subscribers to the channel. So I want to also just kind of say thanks to all the new subscribers and welcome. I don't upload super often to the channel. I will try and upload every now and then. But I've had about 2,000 subscribers join the channel in the last month or so. We just recently hit 7,000 subscribers, which is pretty crazy. So I really appreciate that. Thanks very much. Welcome to all the new subscribers. I hope you can enjoy the content. I hope this is helpful for you and useful. If you want to see more content like this, leave me a comment. Or if you've got suggestions or questions, leave me a comment. If there's a video I can do, I'll happily do it for you as soon as I can. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. That's about it. Just quick recap of those rules then. Number 1, treat every firearm as if it's loaded. Number 2, keep it pointed in a safe direction at all times. Number 3, keep your finger off the trigger until you make the conscious decision to fire. And number 4, know your target and what's beyond it. Alright, so hope you found that useful. If you did, give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, subscribe. Thanks for watching.